Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Tuesday topic. Today's topic is Ethically Speaking, Infusing Responsible Conduct of Research Across the College, with our panelists, Dr. Roseanne DiMaria Galelli, Dean Laura N. Gitlin, Dr. Constance Perry, and Zach Hathaway. And so it looks like we've got a good number of people in the room already, and we're ready to get started. Let me throw it over to Dr. Roseanne DiMaria Galelli. Roseanne?
Well, thank you, Darren, for that great welcome, and thanks always for your efforts pulling us together. Today, we're kicking off a special series. It will be week 9 each quarter on Ethically Speaking, and each session will cover a interesting research case study related to research ethics. So right now, because it's our really first presentation, I'd like to turn this over to Dean Gitlin to give us a wonderful welcome. And before we do that, though, let me just go over the agenda. So as everybody's coming in, we will have a great welcome from the Dean and introducing the Ethically Speaking series. We'll go over the Responsible Conduct of Research Training Plan for CNHP. And then what we'll do for each series is we will have a case study, and we will read the case study, and then we'll go out into breakout rooms. And we'll have our own discussions, and then we'll come back and debrief, and we'll call it a day. So with that, I'd like to really turn it over to Dean Gitlin and thank her for all of her efforts to help us move this forward. So Laura.
Thank you. And welcome, everybody. I had asked just to give just a few words because this series is so critical. It's really at the heart of what research is all about. And I'm glad to see so many of you are here. And I want to thank Roseanne and Darren and Connie and Zach and all the organizers and the IT crew that's helping here. I think I wanted to just make a couple of points. And of course, we're all going to learn about different aspects of the ethics in research, but I think we must consider this series as part of our lifelong learning. So ethics is not about one and done, like, oh, you went on and like I just got right before coming on that I am due to do some kind of training and, I'll look at it. It's not, no, this is about reflection and about working really hard and to remain ethical in all different ways, from the way we identify and enroll people in our trials and other studies, to the way that we consent, to the frameworks we use to analyze our data, to the questions we ask and how we ask them, and then, of course, very critically to the grant writing process, as well as journals, professional journals. It's all about the peer review process and respecting the ethics of peer review. I think, ethics changes over time too. And I know, Dr. Perry, I'm hoping you'll get into that a little bit. And we're learning more, and there's a lot of research about ethical practices. And that's really important too, that we understand what the best practices are from the research literature on ethics. But I think it's just easy to lapse into certain kinds of rote performance in research that we have to begin to question in terms of our own practices. And research is a reflective practice. And therefore, ethics is definitely, a part of that. And I know that you're going to be introduced to frameworks and to case studies. I want to highlight for those of you on the participating that NIH is taking a look at, in particular, the ethics of peer review. And they are very concerned about maintaining ethical standards in the peer review process. So for example, if we are reviewing a grant or if we're reviewing a manuscript, there are ethical practices around that. And we actually have to sign forms that you should look at very carefully that say that you will not share this material and in any way, and that in the NIH world, you really have to destroy the grants that you're reading if you are a grant reviewer. And so there are very big penalties for breaking the peer review process at the NIH. And that's just one example of some of the ethical considerations in doing research. But I just wanted to point out that NIH is blogging about this. I believe Roseanne has integrated some of the cases that they're talking about at the NIH. And they're looking at this very carefully because there have been infractions up until this day. And then I think you'll get into possibly some of the historical unethical practices of researchers. And to this day, I live in the Art Museum Fairmount. I live a half a block away from the Eastern Penitentiary that was the site of University of Pennsylvania researchers who produced a book called Acres of Skin. And they practiced a whole set of various dermatological experiments on prisoners. And they considered that okay. And that was really very, very recent. And you see with COVID too, some of the ethical issues that emerge to vaccinate, not to vaccinate, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a really, really important series. We want it to be a part of the fabric of our culture. It's obviously incredibly important for our students, our pre-doctoral and our postdoctoral fellows, but really for all of us, our professional staff, our research staff, our faculty. And so I am very glad to see that you're all here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Roseanne, to continue. And again, thank you so much for giving this such careful thought and starting. We have to start and we'll keep moving forward in different ways in terms of the ethics. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that great welcome. And we look forward to continuing to have these great conversations with faculty throughout the year. And so can we go to the next slide? And I just want to go over a couple of comments in terms of what is responsible conduct of research. I think we all know this, but it's always good to refresh our minds about the definitions, because every time you hear them, you learn something new and different. And a lot of times RCR is called research integrity. And, you know, not only does our institution and our own professions mandate that we conduct research that's ethical, but also if we're getting funding from the NIH or the NSF or the USDA, all of these organizations require that we demonstrate that we are conducting research ethically, according to legal and regulatory compliance, and that our training really touches on integrity, honesty, transparency, competence, collegiality, on and on. So these are all of the concepts that we'll cover throughout in this series. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So again, what's really also very critical is that many of our students now and faculty are moving toward training grants. So we're trying to move as an R1 university, get more F awards, K awards, T awards, you name the alphabet soup. What's really important with all of these grants is that we have a training mechanism in the continued responsible conduct of research. And as the dean said, this research training is not a one and done deal. It's about ethical training across the lifespan of a researcher. And the NIH has specific requirements in terms of face-to-face courses, informal education, as well as lab, one-on-one type of discussions between mentors and mentees. So we're really hoping that this series will help fill the gap in some of this training that's required by the federal agencies. Next slide, please. So this is a broad overview of the CNHP RCR training. City training is required by the IRB and the Office of Research for all researchers, staff, and students. And all the modules depends on what type of research you're conducting, but that is a requirement here in the college. And our doctoral students are required to take the University Responsible Conduct of Research course. And our goal as we work on re-envisioning the PhD programs here in CNHP is to really deliver a college-wide RCR course starting in the academic year 22 to 23. We are rolling out today the Tuesday Topics, the Ethically Speaking series. And this is really developed for researchers, staff, and students to continually reflect on RCR throughout their career. And, you know, as a caveat, the NIH does require that instruction be undertaken in responsible conduct of research during each career stage and at a frequency of no less than once every 4 years. So we're hoping that this Tuesday Topic series will help us all continue to grow and meet these requirements. And the target audience for these are, you know, researchers, staff, and students involved in research. And we will be maintaining a record of attendance and distribute certificates of attendance if you need that for your own training records. So we will be keeping those records. And also, you know, it's really important that you have conversations with your research team and the students have conversations with their mentors on the informal discussions regarding responsible conduct of research. And that usually comes on a one-on-one basis particularly when you're at the point of collecting data or putting a proposal together. These are these informal discussions that are really critical. And what we're hoping to develop, which is under development, is a guidance document for the college to document responsible conduct of research training for inclusion in grant submissions. And once we have that developed, we'll hand it off to Arun to post on the CNHP Research SharePoint site. And we're also going to be, we've started and we're going to finalize putting together a website or a link on the SharePoint site that gives everyone some resources for responsible conduct of research training. And watching the time, and one thing that we will do, next slide, please. These are some topics, upcoming topics. We have them planned out until spring of 23. So there's lots of opportunities here. And, you know, we are not going to lead this. We're providing the framework, but I look forward to my colleagues, postdocs, faculty joining us in leading one of these other presentations. We have a framework put together for developing them, and we can work with you, but please, we look forward for everybody participating in being a leader and moving this forward. And with that, I'd like to ask Darren if he can launch a poll. We will be having poll questions, which should be coming up now. And if you could take a few moments to answer these questions, because this could give us insight into our current state of knowledge in the college. Okay, so if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you for doing that. I just want to start off today. Case study was going to be on research misconduct. And I think it's really important for everybody to always understand the questions and or the definition of terms. And per the Public Health Service policy, research misconduct means falsification, fabrication, or plagiarism in proposing, performing, or reviewing research, or in reporting its results. And we will give you these slides so that you can have them for your reference. But fabrication is really making up data or results or recording and reporting them. Falsification is manipulating research materials, equipment, or processes, or changing or omitting data so that the research is not accurately represented in the research record. And plagiarism is the appropriation of another person's ideas, processes, results, or words without giving appropriate credit. Research misconduct does not include honest error or differences of opinion. So next slide, please. And Drexel also has adopted their own policies on the conduct of research. And this is the link here to the Provost website for the Drexel policies. And for the purposes of this policy, scientific misconduct, again, is defined as fabrication, falsification, plagiarism, or other practices that seriously deviate from those that are commonly accepted within the scientific community for proposing, conducting, or reported research. It doesn't include honest error or honest differences in interpretation. And I think that's important, especially as we all learn, sometimes we make honest mistakes and we won't get penalized for that. So next slide, please. In addition, the Drexel University Office of Research and their misconduct also identify research misconduct, that a finding of research misconduct has to include significant departure from accepted practices of the relevant research community. And, we are diverse. We have basic scientists and policy researchers. So some policies may vary if you do animal research versus human subjects. The misconduct has to be committed intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly. And the allegations have to be proven by a preponderance of evidence. Almost sounds very legal, and it is. So the next set of slides are just, again, this is all from the Office of Research Integrity website, definition of terms about allegations, complaint, evidence, inquiry. Next slide, please. Investigation, what's the evidence, respondent, and who the witnesses are. So these, are our university guidelines. Again, we're given them when we come on board, but it really is important to take the time to go through these and review them, because every time I look at them, I learn something new. Next slide, please. So I also want to go over the compliance policy. So just as with child abuse, we all have a responsibility to, number one, conduct research ethically and to report research that's not conducted ethically. And this is the compliance policy for the university. All members of the university community are expected to report any activity or practice that may violate any applicable rule to their supervisor, their chief compliance officer, general counsel, or the confidential hotline. And again, if you report this to your supervisor will take this up to the chain of command. Anybody in a faculty member, if somebody shares with you something about research misconduct, you need to report that. If you don't want to call the hotline, talk to your department chair, one of the associate deans, who will then kick it up to the dean, who then reports it on to the compliance officer, etc. So there's several different ways of reporting information. Next slide, please. And again, people are protected against retaliation if they report any sort of research misconduct. So these are all the Drexel policies, and I really do encourage you to, when this is done, to really spend some time and go through and relook at them, because it's really important that we keep this in the back of our mind, what we can and shouldn't do. Next slide, please. And again, this is the actual website to the Drexel Compliance Hotline. Again, you can make a confidential report straight to the hotline without any repercussions. Next slide, please. And again, this is just information on more Drexel compliance policies in terms of investigation and allegations and protection. And as I mentioned again before, the Provost's office also has academic policies on the conduct of research that we are bound to. So, we get it from the research side as well as the Provost side as well. And students working in our labs are also to adhere to academic research ethical standards as well, which you've all taken city training, and all the doctoral students have completed the RCR course for the university. And I'm glad to see that many of you are here today. So with that, I'm being mindful of the time, and that's why I'm speaking fast. We have a case study for you. We started out easy this time. CHOP has a great online handbook, guidebook for teaching responsible conduct of research topics to culturally diverse training groups. It was funded by a training grant by the RCR Research Development Network. And the website is in the public domain from this link. And we've taken, next slide, a case study. Oops, backwards, what happened? Okay, there we go. We've taken a case study. It's a short one, but it's really quite action-packed. And I don't know, Zach, do you want to take over and give us a read of it?
Sure, we can read through it now, and then we'll split off into our groups to go through the discussion questions. So here we have Tony. He's only been a postdoc for about 6 months, but he already feels a lot of pressure to obtain independent funding. His mentor, Dr. Oliva, suggests that he apply on his own for a Young Investigator Award on the genetics of autism. Dr. Oliva provides Tony with all of the text of her previous and successful applications on the same topic, applications submitted prior to Tony's joining the lab. Tony does not have strong writing skills, and he struggles to put her relevant content into his own words for the application. And as the grant deadline approaches, he finds himself cutting and pasting long paragraphs from Dr. Oliva's application into his own, so much so that the 5-page document begins to look like a mini version of a previous application. He also copies sentences verbatim out of one of Dr. Oliva's published manuscripts. Tony assumes that this is okay because his mentor will be working together with him on this project. And Dr. Oliva reads the application, remarks that it is great, extremely well written, and he later sends it out that same day.
Oliva's text, what can be done to address these factors? What is Dr. Oliva's responsibility? Does it make a difference whether the text came from a grant application or a published manuscript? And, you know, reflecting on your own training and you know, what have you learned about that, and has this happened to you or someone you know? And are there circumstances where it would be fine to copy the text? And what are the sanctions or consequences for doing it? So,
all right. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open up the breakout rooms. I've broken you into one of 3 breakout rooms. Zach and Connie and Roseanne are the moderators in one of each of the rooms, and everyone can go on there if you have questions or you get stuck. I'll be hanging out here in the main room, and I'll come and help you out. All right, so here we go.
thank you. Well, thanks, everybody. I think we'll just spend a few minutes debriefing. Deetha was kind enough to lead the discussion in our breakout room. So I don't know, Deetha, do you want to just touch base on like 1 or 2 aha moments or discussion main points?
I mean, so I think one of the big things about this case study is that we also went above and beyond the central theme of plagiarism. We did identify other problems that were, there between the mentor and mentee, and, certain examples of a strained relationship that we could identify. So I felt like, plagiarism was one of the central themes around which a lot of questions were framed, but we did identify that, the mentee was under a lot of pressure, and the mentee was also relatively new in this position.
Thank you. Zach, your group.
Yeah, we definitely touched on kind of the relationship between the mentor and the mentee as well. And one of the big things that we talked about is the importance of setting up like check-ins and time points. Like you have your deadline and you work backwards from there to figure out when certain things need to be done. And you can kind of keep each other accountable instead of last minute sending it out, getting some vague feedback and then submitting it, which I think was also part of the issue here. We also talked about how down the road, something like this, which is very much steeped in plagiarism, could also potentially lead to fabrication. Let's say if he's using the methodology or reporting any results that he didn't, that don't actually have results, they're expected, they're not the actual findings, that could be considered fabrication as well. And then in addition to that, we spent some time on this idea, the idea of when is it okay to copy and paste text? Like you don't want to copy and paste the methodology because that's something that you should be developing. But background text, maybe some of that, there's only so many ways you can say it. So we had a real experience of when it's okay and when it's not okay that we talked about. So that was really good. Anything else any of you guys want to add?
Connie.
Yeah, so we touched on many of the same things. We thought that this was definitely a failure of adequate mentorship, and we had a rich discussion about, you know, when is it okay? Again, when is it okay to cut and paste? And Ben shared I don't know if you want to talk about, you know, a case where someone you knew submitted paper and the journal actually flagged it for having the same methodology as a previous paper by the same authors.
You got it. And they're still working through that right now, whether they have to cite their old paper or to completely rework it, even though it is very much the same methods. It's just it's a part of their work as well.
Part of the larger,
Yeah.
larger project.
Yeah, I think that's always a problem when you're citing several papers, publishing papers with the same methodology or same approach, different studies. There's only so many ways of saying it, and you have to self-cite yourself, and some journals don't like that.
And we talked about the difference between, you know, maybe it's okay if you're not doing something that's meant for public consumption, like, you know, cutting and pasting pieces from one protocol to a new protocol, if it's the same description of, you know, how to run an assay, how to do, you know, but it definitely gets into a gray area, like, and then how do you teach new researchers coming into the field about, you know, navigating that ambiguity.
Well, I want to thank everyone for their time, and I think this worked out great. Do you, in future ethically speaking sessions, do you think we should disseminate the case study ahead of time, or to prep, or not? What do you think? What does the group think?
I think it worked fine today. It's not long to read through.
Okay, great. That's what I want to.
Notion.
Super. Thanks, Melissa. Any other comments?
Did we want to do the poll again at the end?
Yeah, why
Make
don't
people
we?
feel better?
Sure.
Well, it's 5 o'clock. And thank you all for joining us at the end of today. It's always nice to have a good, vigorous attendance here at Tuesday Topics. We'll see you next week, and then we take a couple of weeks off. So next week, and then not until June 22nd. All right. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.